move fast and break things doesn't work in financial services. Okay. When you're a social media company, the stakes for getting it wrong are you have fewer users. When you get it wrong, you're messing up people's lives and you're financially liable.
I can't wait to introduce you to Knowing Me, Knowing You, the Know Me podcast where the future of financial advice starts with discovery. We're bringing you candid conversations with top industry leaders, innovators, and behavioral finance experts, exploring how wealth managers can deepen client relationships, personalize advice at scale, and drive real business growth. Because clients don't just want financial plans, they want to feel understood. They want to be known. Stay tuned, subscribe, and get ready to transform the way you connect with clients. Know Me, transforming discovery into growth. Hi, and today we are honored to welcome Jason Pereira, one of the most accomplished and respected voices in financial planning and advisor technology today. Jason is a true polymath in the wealth management space. He's a financial planner, entrepreneur, fintech advisor, podcaster, educator, and advocate for fiduciary standards. With over 20 years of experience, 9 professional designations, hundreds of podcasts and articles and public appearances, he is shaping how the next generation of advisors think about their work and connect with their clients. As partner and senior financial consultant at Woodgate Financial, host of the FinTech Impact podcast and advisor to numerous startups, he's leading the charge on integrating behavioral finance technology and digital intimacy into client relationships. His work pushes the industry beyond transactions, I would even say beyond products, toward meaningful, transparent, intelligent advice. And we are thrilled to have Jason on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I always say that all those do is basically set a high bar that I will not live up to, but go right ahead. Let's see what we do.
It's great. You know, most people say, I just want, that was enough to get my wife to listen to the show or my partner or whomever.
Well, my wife's not going to listen to the show. It's fine.
We'll see if we can make it.
When you produce over 500 podcasts yourself, your wife gets tired of listening to your shows.
Yes. Honestly, resonate. My husband doesn't listen to mine either, but I do have several regulars that do listen. And so I'm excited to also give them the opportunity to hear your voice. And we always start off with the same question. What excites you the most about the moment that we're in right now, about the future of wealth management?
Wow. It is an exciting and very uncertain time. I mean, about just over 2 years ago now, almost 2.5 years, we basically had this thing called large language models drop on our laps. And suddenly this AI innovation started shaking things up. I know we're recording this after the markets bounced back a little bit from the SaaSpocalypse correction that we had that was sparked by nothing more than a release of a product by Claude. So the reality is that people are starting to get nervous, and rightly so, because this is a transformational technology that's going to change the way we do everything. And I think that if anything, it reinforces the value of those who have human connection in what it is they do. Because the busy work, the heavy lifting, the stuff that we have to do to service our clients, that's really what this AI is going to eat up. And frankly, what comes out of it is hopefully a industry that's going to have more time on their hands to move more and more closely towards the client and help them basically be the best version of themselves. So I think we're at a technological juncture forcing a transformation across many industries, and ours no different.
You know what I love about your answer is that it's no surprise, and even on every media channel, people talk about reactions to markets and what's going on in very behavioral finance terms. People are nervous, they're jittery, they're feeling something. Yet in our industry, we've been very averse to kind of using that type of a language when it comes to the one-on-one. We get very scientific and very technical. But in aggregate, we're comfortable with it. We kind of talk about the feelings and the emotions, and it's kind of, it feels normal and natural to use that type of language. Anyway, that was just a reflection that I had in your choice of words. What brought you to this? Why did financial planning stick? You have been in the space since the late 90s. Was there a moment, something that made you realize that this is your life's calling and you wanted to get into, financial planning and wealth tech?
Yeah, I mean, there's various things that kind of led me down the path. The true origin story, which I only really kind of self-discovered, previously was My family, had a successful business that unfortunately went under, and that caused economic shock within the family. And I saw the negatives of having and then not having, right? And I think there was that inbred with me a deep sense of need for financial security that I've only reflected on more recently. So when knowing that I needed to, wanting to go to university to basically better my career prospects, not knowing what to do, I took a work term in a brokerage firm, one of the large brokerage houses in Canada, and then stayed on for years after, all through university. And what I did see was a little bit of everything. All of the bad, right down to stereotypical 1980s movie broker behavior, and all the potential for good. And what really struck me when I was there was I got to do a little bit of financial planning back then, even though I was unqualified, grossly unqualified to do some of this work. But just saying, like, wait a sec, I changed this thing here and it has this impact for the rest of your life. And now the thing that you want in life is achieved. Like, this is the point. Like, this is the point of all this, right? Not chasing numbers for numbers' sake or, whatever new marketing fad there was. That's really kind of where I got the exposure to it and said, okay, this is where the focus needs to be. So when I eventually left that environment and got to start thinking about what kind of practice I wanted to build when I actually got my own opportunity to do so, it was very much centered on basically using financial planning as a tool for self-actualization. Before I'd even understood the term, that's really what it was all about. It was taking, I think the industry gets lost in the fact that it's numbers on a screen and things are bouncing around, and but really we lose sight of the fact that that line is not a number. That line is someone's livelihood when they're in their 90s. That line is their kids' ability to go to school. That line is every hope and dream that they ever had. So just basically trying to bring that focus back to the conversation is where, a lot of it got grounded. So, and when you think about the power of that and the positive change it can have in people's lives, it's hard not to be passionate about what it is this industry can do at its best form, and not be, frankly, demanding that the industry should live up to the promise of what it can be.
Yeah, it's so core. It's literally Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and our work is actually achieving that very highest tier.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your story and why you actually transitioned into financial planning. But you've said pretty openly that a lot of people, I imagine even advisors and heads of advisory firms and PE owners of advisory firms, might misunderstand what financial planning is. Can you explain your perspective on that? And how is the industry's focus on products, investments, returns, performance still getting in the way of everything you just said that is core to your journey?
Well, we'll go into another bias, which is anchoring, right? Like your understanding of the universe anchors very much upon what your understanding was when you first started. And this industry was absolutely born out of product sales and market access, right? So it's not unusual that basically the language and the concept of what this industry is still wrapped around everything. Basically, the concepts that were established before we even had computers, and we're sitting under the buttonwood tree and basically trading physical certificates. Like that's literally how far back the consciousness of what it is we do goes. So when in modern, so first off, it's deeply rooted as an anchoring point within media, within consumer expectation. But then the counterpoint to that is that along the way, we developed something that gets the systems that have gotten closer and closer to the human being, right? Planning being one of them, being specifically the one. I think the final frontier of that is the implementation of behavioral finance as a mechanism for fulfillment with the use of financial planning. That's a diatribe we can go on later. But the counterpoint is that what I find amusing about this industry is that marketing departments tend to overpromise. And what I mean by that is they discover the concept of financial planning and, hey, this is great. People like Jason are talking about this transformation. We see this. Let's market that we do that. But then do the advisors actually do that? And the answer is more often than not, no, because they're basically still entrenched in their thinking. But then what happens is that the people that come into this industry are attracted by that message, get there and find out that that's not happening, but want to do it. So if anything, I say the funny thing is the overpromise of this industry, which often over focuses on the best version of ourselves, helps to actually create the desire for the new participants entering the industry to have that level of fulfillment. So it's, so yes, at the end of the day, the people who are in a hierarchy doing this stuff are effectively looking at it as another product to sell. They're looking at it as something that basically entrenches them in, the client's lives. But when it comes down to what they're there for, they're there to make numbers work, right? And numbers, bottom line is, the more relationships an advisor handles, the more profitable that advisor is, at least in their eyes. However, that is counter to what is possible with proper financial planning. It is impossible to put an infinite number of people on an advisor's lap and be able to service them properly in a financial planning. There's no client intimacy. There's no knowing them. So, when we see that concept basically limited by concepts like the Dunbar number, where you can't know more than a certain number of relationships and keep them straight in your head, subtract out friends and family, and you're talking sub 100 to like 80 households. And we've seen that trend emerge in the RIA market, where everybody's went from focusing on getting the 100 clients they need to like the 80 clients they need. So as we continue to move down this curve of commoditization of product and the heavy lifting and all the work and closer to the human, what we're finding is that when you get closer to the human, you find more ways to basically support them and meet their needs and help them. And by doing that, you're not expanding the number of people you're servicing, you're reducing it, but expanding the offering and the purposefulness to the client you're serving. So that was another long-winded diatribe. Hopefully that got somewhere.
I want to kind of double tap on that one and then get back to the first one that you referenced. So my question on that last point is, are they wrong? The people that are coming into this industry that have no desire or intent or skill to actually approach the human and help the human with their self-actualization and let me actually understand you better so I can serve you better. Yeah. Are they wrong in assuming that that's how the industry is structured? Because the incentive model still rewards the numbers. The incentive model is still very much focused on that persona.
Well, look, every business has to work. Otherwise, it's a charity. That's it. Like you have to make profit or otherwise it's a charity. So, we have to basically have within our minds the entire, was it Fitzgerald who said the sign of a top flight mind is someone who can hold two contrary opinions in their mind at the same time. We have to be profit maximizing while also being service maximizing, realizing that there's a tension between those two that results in a suboptimal outcome for either one of them. The question is, where do you want to over-index? Do you want to get a good profit, which is absolutely possible, very good profit, which is actually possible, while over-indexing on service? Or do you want to just go the other route? Right, which actually makes it harder to maintain your margins because you become undifferentiated. So the market responds to that as well. So are they wrong? The answer is this is not a homogenous market, right? There are people who definitively want to have the Gordon Gekko-esque broker experience, and there's no talking them out of that because that's the gambling psychology they have. And if they want to do that, I am not going to try to talk them out of it. That is them, right? I am not there to change their personality. That is someone, they got to deal with the issues that's driving them to that, even if there are issues, if there are no issues, whatever it might be. So that's fine. Whereas the other side of the spectrum, where we talk about these really deep involvement with people, like that is something else that I also think is not understood by consumers as much. And I think would be demanded more if they saw more of that or understood more of it. But there's all kinds of points in between, right? There are people who want to do it themselves, who just refuse to let anyone else touch it. There are people who want to do it themselves, but also be validated by others. There are people who are just not comfortable, basically being in an interpersonal relationship. It can get deep like that. So it's wrong for us to think, for me to sit on a podium and say and basically say like, this is the way, like, this is what we have to develop. This is the most fulfilling way or the best version of ourselves. But I also recognize that the other models will exist, need to exist, and there's ethical ways they can exist. And I for one, am happy to have those models to differentiate against and simply say that this is what I do. And if you don't like it, then there's other options for you, as opposed to saying you're out of luck.
Yeah, I love what you said about holding the two truths. You've got to build a profitable business, and you have to focus on service and serving your client. I would add another thing, just from my perspective, that the era of product centricity was not only true for financial services. Many other industries have evolved, and tech has empowered them to evolve away from product centricity to solution centricity. And the thing they want to know more than anything else on the planet is information about their client, information about their consumer. We are just late to the game, that I think, maybe 30 years late to what many other industries have had to evolve to in order to differentiate, in order to stay relevant, in order to stay timely than the others. And I think because there were so many friction layers between the professionals and the consumers.
Yeah, I'd say that Look, you're absolutely right. There's an entire concept of this called surveillance capitalism, where, which was
Yeah,
largely a concept invented by Facebook and Google, where you harvest so
yeah,
much data on these people that
you got it.
everybody, a number of times I always say, like, see, they're listening because here's the ad that's on my Facebook. I'm like, is it that, or is it that, like, we Googled it and now there was some sort of signal on our IP address, like whatever mechanism they're using it, they got a digital signal somewhere, as opposed to having a hot mic. A hot mic is an invasion. A digital signal's an invasion, but just not one that is quite as controversial. So, like, we did not get there. And so we did not get there for a long time. And it's quite simply because move fast and break things doesn't work in financial services. Okay. When you're a social media company, the stakes for getting it wrong are you have fewer users. When you get it wrong, you're messing up people's lives and you're financially liable in this industry. Just like move fast and break things does not work in the medical industry, as was discovered by a little company called Theranos. Like, the reality is that when it's low stakes, no problem. When it's high stakes, you're going to have these frictions. And we were, of course, basically dealing with the fact that we had access to data that was proprietary and maybe not structured the right way, but at the same time was surrounded by various policies and regulations that had to be navigated over time to find a way to basically harness all this stuff. But I'll also say that at the reality is that the financial industry is not populated by technologists, right? We do not, the engineers who get hired typically get hired to keep the thing going, not to reinvent the thing, right? Because where's the
Or to
incentive
even
for
do
that?
it better. Like, we don't want
That's
to
it,
just
right?
do it better. Just keep it alive. Yeah.
Well, and everything, we're right. We're rampantly covered with legacy all over the place. Half the industry most of the banking industry still runs off COBOL. So, which is, for those who don't know, a very, very old programming language, which almost no one speaks it, which almost no one's how to code anymore. But the point is that we are not an industry that by its nature rewards risk taking. Right. To some degree, on maybe in portfolios investment. Yes. From that standpoint, yes. But when it comes to structural operations of the business, we don't reward risk taking at all. Right. And because of that, we don't exactly have an inbred knowledge of digital transformation and all this next level of stuff that's going to take, it's going to take to basically transform the industry. But we're not alone, right? Medicine is the same way. Law is the same way. Does that mean some of these industries are ripe for disruption? Yes, they are. Does that depose us from a human relationship? The answer is no.
Yeah. I love that. I would agree and add that, yes, it is that we're not built for that, move fast and break things. We've got the regulations. I would also add, we've got a tremendous amount more complexity, layers, and incentive models that work against that innovation. That's a whole other conversation, though. I would love to come back to something else you said, the other diatribe. So you basically said behavioral finance, and I'm going to restate in different words what I think you said. Behavioral finance helps us get closer to operationalizing the core of financial planning. So when you think about planning, and where behavioral finance plays a role in actually you said executing, I said operationalizing. Talk a little bit more about that, if you don't mind, and how you see that playing out.
So how many times have you heard an advisor say, well, the client just won't take my advice, right? Have they ever stopped to ask themselves if they're ramming a square peg into a round hole? And then maybe sometimes a round peg might be the solution. So the way I look at it is, there's plenty of times we can give people the mathematically optimal thing. I can go into the software, I can produce the optimal portfolio, I can produce the optimal financial plan with all the inputs I have and make a bunch of assumptions. But where are the human inputs besides like some abstract concept of goals and risk tolerance, right? I'm not putting the person's entire psychology into this machine to understand who they are and modify advice based on that. No, that's the role I'm supposed to play. And too often advisors get frustrated that clients fail to execute. And don't get me wrong, some people just are failing to execute in every aspect of their lives, right? So that's a personality issue. But there's plenty of times where people who are reasonable individuals and clients just won't execute, just can't bring themselves to do the thing you talked about. We need to understand why. Because frankly, and I say this all the time, if there isn't a Venn diagram between mathematically optimal and behaviorally optimal, there's no strategy that works, right? There's plenty of people who've been through past financial traumas in their lives, through whatever definitive things that have shaped them and their need for security or their need for, or their risk-taking ability, whatever else it is. They are their own unique butterfly of having gone through their experiences in life that will or will not allow them to accept what it is you're telling them. If they accept what you're telling, great, congratulations. That information that hit the bullseye of being between those two circles. But if it doesn't exist, then we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about it? And the big failure, and to quote my friend Brian Portnoy on this, the behavioral finances application to date in the industry has largely been an absolute failure, because what it does is give you, here's a list of biases that tell you you're wrong or dumb. That's ridiculous, right? What we should be doing is using those biases to understand what is happening. Like, okay, so you're to just communicate with clients to better understand them, but then also unpack what it is that's resulting in their not being able to take action, so that we can help them take action. And that may mean modifying our advice to the less than mathematically optimal thing. But if they can succeed with the less than mathematically optimal thing, because they're able to execute, because it matches the behavioral circle, or it falls within the behavioral circle, then it works. And then who cares? Because they may never be able to do the mathematically optimal thing.
Yeah, I love that. And this would be a great, I know my podcast editors will be doing this, but man, that last component was a fantastic layup to everything we're doing at Nomi. You literally referenced the inputs and actually understanding, how do I understand my client better, have them articulate, really, how do I connect with them, unpack what's holding back the action, and then give the advisor something that helps drive that action. So how do you, when you say that, let's transition from the wealth tech and the organizations that you're involved in to your practice. How are you making those actionable behavioral dynamics come to life in part of your planning conversations?
So there's a number of levels of discovery. I think the best way to answer that is, let's just look at an engagement. Someone comes on board, right? I meet with a prospect. The questions are often based around, what was their previous experience with my industry, to understand what their baseline is. What is it they're hoping to accomplish? What is it that drove them? What is the need that drove them to reach out to me? Because they didn't reach out to me because, hey, it's Monday, I'm just going to pick a random advisor and call them. They reached out out of some sense of need for themselves. So where's that coming from? And trying to like unpack the questions around that. Well, I'm worried about my retirement. Okay, well, appreciate that. When are you thinking about doing that? So like, get the quantifiable stuff. And okay, what's causing you to worry? I don't know that I have enough. Okay, well, and then or I'm basically, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself afterwards. The psychological aspects of it. So you have those conversations early on, and you try to unpack what you can, right? And you can ask some structured questions and questionnaires when they're not around, also to get them thinking. But invariably, you're never, people don't necessarily, they've never been asked these questions. They don't know how to answer. I get responses on questionnaires like all the time, like, I don't know how to answer this. I'm like, then don't, right? Like, this is just to get you thinking. If you can't answer this thing about how you see your life in 10, 20, 30 years, then don't answer it. We're going to discover that together. And the greater the frequency of meeting with the client and leaving room in those meetings to talk, not just about markets, not just about what they got to do to make the plan come true, not just whatever the heck is else on that checklist, but what is happening in their lives, and just getting to know them on a human level starts to inform and help you understand what's driving all of it, right? And that leaves the opportunities to ask the questions when the opportunities present themselves. Where does this fear come from, right? Like, why is this anxiety coming from you? Like, what is it going to take for you? What would it take for you to feel more secure? Like, just being able to ask good questions around them as a person and learning that skill, but you have to have a structured opportunity to do so, right? We basically call it in our little presentation, when we tell people what they're going to do, is every quarterly meeting includes a status check. What does that mean? Just tell me what's happening in your life. Like, because there's oftentimes I can help with small things, financial or otherwise, that you wouldn't think of me top of mind for that solution. But if I can help, I'm gonna do so. But I can't help unless I know. And invariably, their concerns, their needs, their whatever else it is, the longer you're with them, the more you get to know them. Every advisor will definitely say that, but you have to create the opportunity for learning about them.
Okay, I'm going to recap what you just said for our listeners here. So I would say there were 5 key things that I heard. One is really getting to the heart of what was the baseline pain? What brought you here today? There was something that brought you here. And then creating the listening space. There has to be space. I love that you said you have to have the meeting time dedicated to the human level. There has to be a space for the listening to create the human connection, which powers communication And that depth, that better understanding drives value. Getting back to, we're all in here to build businesses that are hopefully very profitable. So as you go through that process, you are then empowered and enabled to deliver more value to the clients who are looking for your help.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Okay. I want to make sure I didn't restate in a way that didn't feel authentic.
I would also say it's a combination. I'd say it's a combination of structured learning, unstructured discussion, but creating the opportunity for both. That is necessary.
I love it. So you're a leader and very well respected in fintech. You are in Toronto, have a very good pulse on the ground of where is innovation coming out of Canada? Where is it coming out of in the States? You have hosted over 400 interviews with founders. How is technology helping or hurting financial advice today? And what does it look like when tech actually improves these human relationships?
So much of the day-to-day about technology is just noise to most advisors. That's the reality of it. Like, the number of times I hear clients, like advisors, panic, like, oh my God, I feel like I'm so behind on AI. Like, you and 99% of them, right? The reality is that when we start off as planners, we create our processes knowingly or unknowingly. And sometimes some of them are very well defined and streamlined. Other of them are all over the place. And we have these technologies that support that. And then of course the world changes around us. So what do? We experiment, we try, and we fail more often than not. If you look at most of the stats on basically adoption rates, like you'll see that adoption rates of new technology often fail unless you really throw yourself into them. I think most people in the industry blindly feel themselves through this entire experience. And what they need to do in order to actually not let it become a distraction, which is some way methodology of hurting. I mean, don't get me wrong, the distraction, if you're learning about what's out there, that's valuable. But if you're just trying and failing, and then just staying in something simplified that's not actually making your life any better, then frankly, you're hurting your entire practice. Because a business, go back to the profitability thing, there's only a couple ways to be profitable, right? Like to make yourself more profitable. So expand the number at the top line, which means expanding people. But again, we have constraints there. And it's basically expand the bottom line by one of two ways. Either you've expanded top line through the first piece, or the efficiency. Like, what is being taken off between A and B? Often and not, advisors get very miserish about what they're willing to pay for technology or what they're willing to pay for humans, but never really looking at what they're actually willing to pay to reduce the time commitment, which then enables them to be more efficient and basically grow that top line in a good way and the bottom line in a good way. So, my advice where it's useful and how it should be done is what I always tell people. Map out, first off, deeply understand your ideal client profile. Who is it you serve? It cannot be a generic everybody, because you can't be all things to all people.
Example, what's yours?
So I specifically deal with two more technical niches. One is successful business owners who are basically at the threshold where they have professionalized their own business to the point where they've delegated to managers and have their team of outside advisors. And what they really need is someone who can explain, who can sit between the accountant, the lawyer, and themselves and help them understand how this entire picture comes together, right? So I become the external CFO, right? They got their internal one for the business. I become the one for their lives, right? So it's when they get to that level of delegation and professionalization. The second one is on cross-border. And that basically was a world I got drawn into because of clients in the first category. You had that. So that expertise basically built itself. So complexity is often where I live. And that's just me. Now, there's plenty of non-technical niches that exist out there, specifically around clients emotionally. My business partner tends to focus on people transitioning into retirement and early years of retirement, which I refer to as the peak panic years. Am I going to have enough? Oh my God, I'm not going to have a paycheck. What am I going to do with my time? What's my identity going to be? And then, oh my God, I've retired. The paycheck's gone. I need to watch the markets at all times. And, so 5 to 10 years before and after is where that all stems out. And he's just got this way of just calming them. Like, the English accent helps, but he's just got this way of calming them and working their way through it. So some of it can be, so there's plenty, Google, take a look at Kitsis's list of different types of niches that he published years ago, but there's lots out there. But the idea is to deeply understand the needs of one type of consumer, right? One type of client. Then what you want to do is, of course, make sure you're valuable to them. So what is the service offering that you are going to provide to them? Not just, I provide all this and that. It's like, no, map it out. What is the experience? What does it look like for them to go to deal with you. Like we literally have a process for first identification of, our fit meeting. Like here's a prospect. Are they even a fit for the firm? Yes or no? Second meeting, let's go through a lengthy explanation with both spouses of what it is we do, presentations, everything. Then it's separate meetings for financial plannings, investment, taxes, state insurance, all of that, all mapped out, right? When you have a map, you have a process, and a strategy, you can then say to yourself, okay, that cool technology I saw there, I see how that can enhance this part of the process, right? How they can expedite or make this entire thing more efficient. Only when you actually understand the mechanics of how your business moves start to finish, and your mechanics should basically be, same. It's industrialized thinking. It's basically, how do I create this assembly line to get these deliverables and everything else done, so I can focus on the human, the non-technical part of it. Only when you do that can you actually tinker with it and improve the efficiency of it. So, my saying on this is, technology is not a strategy. Technology is there to help you implement your strategy. Start with first principles. Who is it you're serving? How is it you're serving them? What is it you need to deliver to them? How do you map that out start to finish? Who's in charge of what role? How do you actually take what's out there in the marketplace and augment and make that service offering just spectacular?
Yeah. A lot of design thinking in there that is very, very well adopted by tech. So the user journeys, the ICP, what is the job to be done type framework. Those are things that I think are excellent. And I love that you had the heard it here first. Here's kind of the ICP that you have created that others can listen to and understand. How in depth does that need to be? And it does need to be pretty in depth, because you need to actually understand how you're serving them. So I've about 20 more questions I would love to ask you, but as we're running toward the end of time, I'll ask you what is the last question we always ask people on the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast, which is, what is one instance in your life or a conversation you had that totally changed your relationship with money?
Oof, I'll go back to my point of like making self-discovery on myself in terms of past financial traumas and the impact. I'm going to go back to, quoting, it was a seminar with my friends over at Shaping Wealth, who, Meg Lertz, who's one of your advisors, is a part of. And it was one on money stories. So it doesn't sound like anything overly complex, but in it, it was really an exploration of our own personal journeys and the impact of money in our lives. And that's where I kind of had the revelation that, oh boy, it was this like past trauma as a child that actually led me down this path that all resulted in me actually ending up in this room. And it was a lot to unpack. And it was basically, it's actually had me kind of step back and not just look at my life, but also try to understand greater, to a greater sense, what has that been? What were those moments for my clients? Like, what is it that happened at their point? Like, one of the best questions for unraveling that is asking them about what money was like as a kid, right? And that's not exactly something you ask in the first meeting. Like, that can be pretty exposing, right? But there are times when they're having a difficulty, they're having some sort of block, they can't get to it. And it's like, listen, humor me here, okay? Following question I ask is a little bit personal, but it often informs the conversation. It comes out of nowhere for them, but it absolutely often uncovers where the core of the problem was. And sometimes the clients just, in talking about it, just like, okay, I see where you're coming from. Like, I'm letting that experience like dictate what's happening here. And you're right, I'm not thinking straight, right? I'm just scared. I'm scared because of whatever. And then you can have a conversation about accepting that fear and basically being able to accommodate it. But yeah, so it wasn't so much a conversation. It was a workshop that, left me kind of thinking through my entire career progression.
What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that vulnerably. And we've heard actually a theme on this podcast, especially professionals. A lot of them say, this is why I got into the business. This is something that was and a lot of them, it's a money trauma. A lot of them kind of come from this experience of money trauma.
Most of the best financial planners you will find are people who basically came from a period of financial instability.
Yeah. Jason, Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your deep expertise, your clarity, your conviction, your thoughts around tech, your advocacy for behavioral insights and intelligent use of bringing more humanity into the advisory relationships, and how tech is pushing this industry in the right direction, how behavioral finance can be built in and executed in order to drive more value out of our industry. It's a privilege to have you here. Where can listeners learn about you? And if they are a very successful tech entrepreneur who has kind of, actioned whatever, or they're cross-border, where can they find you?
Well, my company site is woodgate.com. That's easy enough. But then I also maintain jasonpereira.ca is kind of my catch-all for all the stuff I do. So if you go there, you'll see the various podcasts and podcast appearances on other people's podcasts and interviews and whatnot that I all kind of compile there.
Amazing. For our listeners, whether you're a financial advisor, the head of an advisory firm, somebody who's thinking about tech and product, or if you're just one of those people, and there's several people who listen to this podcast who are just thinking about, how do I personally make better financial decisions for myself? How did this inspire you to think about behavioral intelligence and improving your own money decisions? Please, if you learned anything here, share it with your friends, drop a comment, tag a planner, keep the conversation going, and let me know what you thought. Thank you, Jason.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us bring more transformative conversations to you. Until next time, keep discovering, keep growing, and remember, you're in control of your own financial story. Follow us for more conversations on financial confidence, self-discovery, and the future of money.